Welcome. You're listening to a 2019 Right On Con podcast. This is Sue Stanley from the Right On Con team. I'm thrilled to chat today with young adult author Joan He about her Pitch Wars experience. Joan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about pitch wars. It's such a big part of my writing journey.
So, for those of you who may not know, Joan is the author of the young adult novel Descendant of the Crane, which will be coming out on April 2nd of 2019. Very exciting time for you right now. From Albert Whitman Company. Joan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so um, as you've mentioned, I'm a young adult author. I'm also a recent college graduate, and I studied psych and Chinese history and language and culture in college. And yeah, those two things have definitely played a role in my writing. And I currently live in Philly, and I'm right by the waterfront overlooking the Delaware River.
So, it is very cold today where you are.
It is, yeah. I haven't been outside though yet, so just rolled out of bed, still toasty.
Okay, well, good. Um, can you tell us a little bit for people who may not have ever experienced Pitch Wars or even read about it or have heard something about it but don't really know what it is? Can you tell us what Pitch Wars is?
Yeah, so it's a contest, but also a mentorship in that writers who are hoping to find agents for their books are able to submit to mentors of the contest, and mentors have specific wish lists of the types of books they're looking for. They also write about their editorial strengths in those wish lists, so that's something that aspiring writers can consider as they're looking at mentors. And then once they do submit to a mentor, um, the mentors have a window of consideration where they're able to go through the manuscript, go through the query usually that's submitted, and then the sample pages. And if they like more, then they request more. And ultimately, a mentor will select a writer whose manuscript they feel strongly about and that they know how to improve, and take on that mentee. And once you are in Pitch Wars as a mentee, once that selection period is over, then you work with your mentor for a window of time to prepare that manuscript for the agent showcase round, which so I was in Pitch Wars back in 2015. A lot has changed since then. So back when I was in it, the window of editing was like 2 months, and then the agent round was in November. So we would get into Pitch Wars like end of August, and then November we would have all of our entries go up on the Pitch Wars website, and then agents would be able to request. But now I believe that window for editing is longer, but I think the process is still the same in that you get to work really one-on-one with a mentor. And by the way, a mentor is someone usually who is one step or two steps ahead in the publishing process. So they bring a lot of experience to the table. They're either agented authors, or some of them even have book deals, or they're publishing professionals, or they have experience providing editorial services. So it's kind of like what Pitch Wars is. It's a mentorship, but with like the added cherry on top of a contest at the end, where you could potentially get an agent after you're through all of this.
And you did. That was your experience. Is that where
Yeah.
you got your agent?
So yes and no, in that my agent wasn't actually one of the ones who participated in the Pitch Wars like agent showcase round. So in that showcase round, there are invited agents who can come and request on the entries, and there are also some ninja agents who may not necessarily be in the lineup of invited agents, but they peruse the entries still and they are able to request. My agent actually wasn't one of those, but you're right in the sense that the manuscript I edited during Pitch Wars with my mentor, that was the one I queried. And then in about a month or so after Pitch Wars, that's when I got the offer for my agent. So I actually queried him, but it was with the manuscript that I had worked with my mentor. So yes, in that sense, Pitch Wars helped me get my agent, but it wasn't directly like in the Pitch Wars contest I got my agent.
Okay, thank you. So how did you hear about it in 2015? How did you hear about Pitch Wars, and why did you decide to enter?
So the answer to this is that I honestly don't even remember how I heard of Pitch Wars anymore. I guess I heard of it in the same way that I did for like the Miss Snark Query critique opportunities, or the Writer's Voice, or Sun versus Snow. All of those contests that were kind of like prevalent in the writer circles back in the day, but also still now. So in that sense, I guess I either saw a mentor tweeting about it, or maybe I saw the page of previous entries, or maybe it was listed on a blog somewhere as a resource for writers. The thing is, after a while, like the contests, they start snowballing into each other. So, for example, I entered Pitch Slam, which again, I'm not sure if that's still a contest now, but back in the day, there were judges from Pitch Slam who were also mentors in Pitch Wars, and there are judges in Writer's Voice or Nest Pitch or Sun versus Snow that are also mentors in Pitch Wars. And then there were fellow entrants in those contests that I just mentioned that also were then entrants in Pitch Wars. So it's kind of like I was in those circle. I was in that circle of people like entering these contests and staying aware of these resources. And I guess word of mouth, I eventually heard of Pitch Wars that way, if that makes sense.
Hmm. It does. So your manuscript, you said there were 2 months. The year that you were in Pitch Wars, there were 2 months between the pitch war, getting your mentor, and the agent round. So in that so your manuscript, how ready was your manuscript, or how intensive was the work that you had to do during those 2 months with the editing for the editing process?
Yeah, so luckily, my mentor decided that my manuscript was pretty it still needed work, but in terms of like big picture, like plot overhauls or character overhauls or any sort of developmental edits like that, she felt like the manuscript was pretty ready. She mainly thought that I had issues with pacing, so we really worked together to tighten the pacing, in like in terms of like scenes and chapter flow. So I would say definitely my workload compared to some of the other mentees that year was not as big. And so, yeah, I think the 2 month window worked fine for me, but definitely it was tight depending on, again, what kind of edits you had. So if you had very developmental heavy edits, then there definitely were cases where when at the end of the 2 months, maybe you and your mentor decided that you weren't ready to submit to the agent showcase, and then you would kind of withdraw, or you would say delivery in 1 month upon finishing, and you would have that text on your agent showcase page just to let agents know that yes, like I do want to participate in this, but it's going to take me a month. So that individual decision was up to the mentor and mentee teams whether or not to withdraw before the agent round or have that extra like disclaimer on the top of their entry.
That makes sense. Did you do any research, or how much research did you do on your on the mentors when you sent in your pitches to the mentors?
So I literally decided to enter maybe like an hour before the sub window closed. So you can probably guess that the time I had for research was very tight. It means that I really only got to look at everyone's wish lists. And luckily, those are actually very informative. I know nowadays you can like stalk the mentor on like Twitter, you can read their books or like read their blog, but honestly, there's so much thought that goes into the wish list. Having been on the other side now, and having worked 2 years as a mentor, I know that we really try to make those wish lists as detailed and helpful as possible. And so they really are a great resource. At the same time, disclaimer is that I didn't actually submit to the mentor who picked me. So the other thing is that even though the wish list is really helpful, sometimes you can still miss mentors just because there's so many awesome mentors. And so my entry was actually a mentor I submitted to. She actually really liked my entry, but didn't think it was right for her. And so she passed my pages. She requested the full for me. She passed my pages on to another mentor who she knew was looking for more fantasy. And so that's how I actually connected with my mentor because I was passed on.
Wow, that was fantastic. That the original mentor was willing to do that, and must have really believed in your manuscript as well, even though it wasn't a fit for her.
Yeah, so yeah, that happens. Yeah, that happens a lot actually. Where because it's such a tight knit community among mentors, um, we kind of all sort of know each other's tastes, and we're definitely watching out for each other in that submission window where it's like if we receive a lot, but then someone else is like, "Oh, I haven't found something quite yet," like we will forward things to them. Yeah.
So I know it's a little bit different now, but what was the time period like between sending the original application, submitting your pages, and then the request for the full, and then getting the email that you actually had been selected by a mentor?
It was process. Like you said, it's definitely different now. I think the contest has changed a lot in that sort of like the amount of hype surrounding it. Pitch Wars has always been like the cream of the contests, especially like back in the day before we had more mentorship sort of contests. It was definitely like the one that stood out to people as being like, this is the one you want to get into if you want to work one on one with someone for an extended period of time. But even then, I definitely feel like that has grown in a sense, like that feeling of Pitch Wars, like the sort of the scale of it. And so back then, even though it was like a big thing, I entered, I forgot about it, kind of like the time in between passing the blur. It didn't really hit me that like it was actually starting to pick up until I started getting requests. And then once I started getting requests, at that point, um, I already been so that's the other thing. This manuscript I already been querying for like a month, so it wasn't queried heavily per se, but I had also experienced rejection on this one. It's not like where I see now like a lot of writers that are drafting and revising specifically with the deadline of pitch wars. Like I got to finish this before pitch wars, and then sometimes the first rejections they're getting are from mentors and pitch wars. But for me, like getting those requests or sending them out, that didn't really make me feel too nervous because it was kind of just like the same as an agent requesting, right? Like there's a good chance that they weren't going to connect with it, and that was fine. So I sent out those requests. I think so. I submitted to 5 mentors, and I got 4 requests back from 3, which was really exciting. But I sent them out. I didn't think too much of it. And then my mentor, the one who I actually ended up working with, Mara, I hadn't submitted to her, but she emailed me saying like, "Hey, so and so passed your works on to me, and I'm really enjoying them." And that's when I started feeling a little bit like, oh, like this could actually happen. Like I could actually get into pitch words. And again, I had done contests before, and so I was again prepared to know that I didn't get in. I had come really close in a few contests where it looked like I was going to get in, but then I didn't. So I tempered expectations, and even though I was excited because I hadn't submitted to Mara, but she seemed to be enjoying the manuscript, I didn't really have expectations when the final list of entrants got in and it was listed. And when I searched my name, I was really surprised and happy to see my name. And I don't think it really sunk in that, like, oh, I got into this contest that is, again, it was really known back then and still now in the writing circles as being like the contest that would help you improve your skills and give you not just editing knowledge, but also just more knowledge of the industry because you were working so closely with someone. So that was exciting. But yeah, I think now thinking back, it's just all a blur of like the nerves have definitely like in my revisionist sort of like memory, the nerves definitely don't seem to be that big of a part. But I know in the moment I was probably extremely nervous and extremely happy when I saw my name on that list. Yeah.
Were you in school full time at that time as well?
Yes, I was a sophomore in college at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing, and also it must have been really hard. But at the same time, it couldn't have been your sole focus because you there's so much pressure to be in school and all the work that goes there too. That
Yeah.
might have helped that distraction, I
Although
would think.
sometimes it felt like the whole writing life sort of like hijacked my brain. Honestly, like now thinking back to school, some of those parts are a blur. I'm like, how did I even like, especially senior year when my book was selling? I'm like, how did I even go to class? How did I even like I did all those things, but now because again, so much of writing is when it's happening, it's really exciting, and there are like deadlines, and it's just sometimes writing does take over. In terms of how much I remember what happened.
Yeah, I'll bet that would be really hard. Um, Let's see, you answered that. Sorry, I'm going to take a second. If you can you, I'm going to cut this part out. Can you move the microphone a little bit closer to your mouth again? It
Oh,
got slipped
sorry.
away.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, so I'm going to pick up here. Can you talk a little bit about the revision process with your mentor? What was involved? How many rounds did you do, and how long did it take? And you mentioned that it was 2 months, but I'm just wondering what the process was for you and your mentor, if that's kind of individual. Now that you're on the other side as a mentor, what that process is like from both sides, and what your experience it was with that.
Yeah, so for my revision experience, like I said, my mentor, even before she selected me, actually, she was contacting me via email, and that's something that we also did as mentors. Because funny thing is, my mentor and I, we ended up being co-mentors later on for 2 years. So yeah, so she contacted me via email and she was like, hey, I think these are like, if we were to work together, like, where are some things you foresee as being weak in your manuscript? Where are some things you want to work on? And so I would say, like, the revision dialogue really opened even before I got into Pitch Wars. And then once I got into Pitch Wars, I had a good sense that my mentor felt like the overall manuscript, again, was in good shape in terms of plot and character. And it really was just she wanted to work with me on pacing and tightening my lines. And so she gave me uh, edit letter right about like a week after we all got in. And in the edit letter, she outlined the specific pacing things we wanted to fix. She also wanted to beef up the romance a bit. And so I took that edit letter and I started revising, and I sent her chunks as I finished revising them because I wanted to. This was kind of my first time really working with someone this in depth. I was really worried that I was going to mess up and that I was going to submit the manuscript back to her after a month and she was going to be like, this is completely in the wrong direction. So I asked if she would be willing to look at chunks of it as I finished, and she, obviously the mentor always works with you, like we're always willing to accommodate. So she was willing to look at chunks of 25% as I finished them, just to make sure that I was on the right track. And then after that one big round of doing the pacing edits, she then read through the whole thing again and she gave me line edits. And so I would say we had two big rounds, and then after that, we really worked super intensely on the first 250 words and the pitch, because that's what ends up going onto the agent showcase page. And my mentor, again, is extremely supportive in that aspect. Now that we've co-mentored 2 years, I know for a fact I'm not as good when it comes to doing like the pitch and the first 250 words. I'm more of a big picture sort of editor. So when it came time for us to mentor our mentee, I kind of like worked pretty closely on the initial edit letter to the mentee because that's my strength, and then my mentor would also provide feedback on that, but then she would kind of take over more for when it came to all of the nitty gritty, like line edits and the copy edits, and also making sure that the pitch and the first 250, I cannot underscore how important those are in this sort of contest, making sure that those were like as best as they could be and grab an agent among like 100 other entries.
That makes a lot of sense. And of course, once they do request a full, it has to be solid enough to sustain that,
Yeah,
right?
so
I mean,
both, yeah. So
yeah.
both aspects definitely really strong. Like definitely if it were just me working with our mentee, like maybe the full manuscript would be fine, but again, there's some books that perform better than other books in contests. That's just the way it is, because in a contest you can only see that first glimpse, and there's so much like sort of like magic dust that goes into that, but it's
Mhm.
really an art of perfecting that pitch and that first 250 pages that again, I'm so lucky that my co-mentor brings that skill to the table.
That's really interesting that the concept, this is a little bit off pitch wars, but the idea that you really have to have different kinds of expertise. In other words, like there are, I'm in a critique group myself, and there are people who are really, really good at character, and there are people who are really, really good at plot. There are people that are really good at looking at the overarching story, and at that, we have one person in our critique group who's really good at the tension between the end of a chapter and the beginning of the next to keep that flow through. So having that kind of multiple layered experience as you edit, um, sounds like it would be really, really helpful to any mentor or mentee that you guys would have now.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, I would not feel as confident as I do in our team if it were just me, because, like you said, like I know I have particular strengths when it comes to like an eye for problem spots, but I also have weaknesses, and that's why I would say there have been questions like, oh, like our co-mentor or like three mentor teams better than one mentor. I mean, it obviously depends, but for me, I know my mentor and I, we really work best as a unit, and we give our mentee the best experience as a result of that.
That's great. So Pitchforks isn't just about revisions and agent requests, though. What else did you take away from the experience? And you are, as a person who's been on both sides, what do you think are the greatest benefits aside from the possibility of representation, aside from the revision? What did you take away that was really beneficial to you on both sides?
So, as a mentee, I would say that obviously, like for me, probably like the smallest part of Pitch Wars was getting to that agent showcase round and then being able to query afterwards. And the thing that really has um, been carried with me all these years is first my relationship with my mentor. Like I said, like we ended up co-mentoring together, and then this is really serendipitous, but she's actually also debuting in 2019 with me. Her
Wow.
book is Coral and Pearl. I'm sorry, that was the old title. Her book is The Crown of Coral and Pearl, and by Mara Rutherford, and it's really full circle in that not only is she debuting, also our mentee from our first year of mentoring together is also debuting with us in 2019. So the three of us, it just goes to show that you really form lasting relationships in Pitch Wars. And I think the best part about Pitch Wars too is showing you that everyone moves on different timelines. It was the first experience for me where, on one hand, for many months, I was working together with writers who were as passionate as me towards my goal. And we were all sort of struggling through the revision trenches together. And then when Agent Showcase came around, we were all really stressed about that. Like, I remember the day of Agent Showcase, like, the funnest part, honestly, was being in the Facebook group. And we would be celebrating each other's requests. And, like, also there'd be a group where we were commiserating not getting requests. And it's that sense of camaraderie that really binded us. But also, as the months went on, after we'd forged that relationship of having gone through this experience together with mostly the same sort of time posts and milestones being hit at the same time, then you get to see that again, like publishing, everything happens to people at different times. There are people who got a lot of requests in agent round and got agents right off the bat, but maybe didn't sell quickly. And then there are people who got a lot of agent requests, got an agent, and then left their agent. And then you had people who got no requests and they went on to write their second book, and then they got an agent and a big deal. And it's really when you start out together and you get to see all the different divergent paths that you learn that lesson publishing very early on. Just knowing that everything happens at a different time, and you really can never expect, just because you're on one trajectory, just because it seems like things are going well or going poorly, you never really know what's around the corner. The industry is so unpredictable in that way. So I would say that's probably like the biggest lesson I've learned as a mentee and also as a mentor, because as a mentor, sometimes as a mentor, you are pushing someone ahead on the road, and someone may get a book deal before you, and someone may hit successes before you, your mentee. And that's definitely a feeling that is something that you have to navigate around. And having been a mentee and knowing that everything's going to happen at a different time definitely made that easier and made it also more rewarding for me as a mentor when my mentee went on to sell before me. And I think that's something that, again, stays with you. That's a skill that stays with you when you then go on to debut, because you're again in a group where different things are happening, different people at different times, and they're getting different things. And being able to celebrate for others, but also work on yourself and know that things will happen for you is, again, something that um, it's a good like psychological like, backbone to have.
I think I know the answer to this question already, but I'll answer it anyway, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you think you could have gained all these benefits on your own, or does Pitch Wars really present a unique opportunity?
So I'm not sure if I'm going to surprise you with this answer or not. I think the thing is, you can gain everything um, that you gain from pitch wars on your own. You can eventually like learn how to edit, and you can learn like what it feels like to be in a part of a group, but then also see like friends maybe move ahead or maybe fall behind, and how to deal with those feelings and how to persevere and walk your own path all the same. It just happens on an accelerated timeline sort of when you're going through pitch wars, because it's such a concentrated experience, and it's really one of a kind in the sense that you're never going to be with a group of 200 people all editing for that same purpose and all kind of going through those initial query rejections and agent requests together. And that's the fun thing. Like when you do, for example, like if you do get an agent out of pitch wars, you might be one of 10 people who are getting those fast offers, and you have that group when you come out pitch wars, because you're like, oh, this person went through pitch wars with me, and we now have multiple agent offers. Like, what do we do, right? And you're able to find those friends really easily. But again, I would say you don't learn. You learn all those things eventually, and there are also things that you don't learn from pitch wars. Like, even though pitch wars is kind of upheld as this great opportunity to learn how to revise, to be honest, I don't think I actually learned how to deeply revise until after pitch wars. You have to realize that, like, just because you go through pitch wars doesn't mean you're going to level up. I now looking back, I realize that I revised quite lightly for pitch wars, and I didn't really know how to dig in quite yet. Revision has always been something that was hard for me. And I didn't even learn when I was revising with my agent how to revise deeply and address issues that were kind of able to be fixed on the surface, but would really benefit from overhaul. It wasn't until I was rejected from submission round one and I was facing some feedback from editors that I was able to decide, like, okay, I need to actually rewrite this book, and that's what taught me how to revise. So I think that's something important to take away, which is that it's okay if you haven't necessarily leveled up your weaknesses after pitch wars, because that's an ongoing process, and some people will jump up after pitch wars and be like, I learned how to revise because of this experience, and then other people might take longer, like I did.
That's excellent. Not only an excellent answer, but excellent advice as well, because I do think it's true. When people are looking at a contest, there are going to be people that will succeed in that contest, and there are people who will not succeed in a particular contest. But taking away from every experience you have, whether you get a mentor at that time or whether you go find a critique group that can support you, that as long as you're moving forward and looking for people who are like-minded, who are trying to grow and learn, and who might have more experience than you, and listen to what people say. It sounds like that's the most important thing that you can do, is hear the feedback and respond to it, regardless of whether it's pitch boards or anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly. You can find community anywhere. It's just that pitchwords makes it maybe easier if you're, especially like me, I'm sort of like really introvert when it comes to respect. So when it comes to this respect, so pitchwords made it really easy for me to just find a community. But at the same time, after pitchwords, like, yeah, as long as, like you said, you're listening and you're actively seeking out that community and you're surrounded by people who you know are going to continue to challenge you to be better as a writer, as an author, then that's what's really important, and you don't need pitch wars necessarily for that.
So how do you think Pitch Wars differs from other mentorship programs like Author Mentor Match, if you have any insight into that?
So having never mentored an author mentor match, I don't have like insider knowledge of it. I only know very surface details. For example, I know Pitch Wars mainly conducts its group activities in Facebook groups, and I know for mentors, at least for writer mentor match, that happens more in like Slack channels. Like, I know surface details like that. Also, obviously, the experiences are different. I'm not sure how that impacts the writer differently per se. But yeah, so with writer mentor match, you don't have an agent round at the end. And there's no like deadline exactly for, all right, like we're going to work together for this amount of time and then it's agent round. That's not the case in writer mentor match. You have a mentor and you work with them as long as you need to, I think, until your book is ready. And I have a friend who is a mentor who's mentee was able to then query her after working with her. And I'm not going to share how that's going, but it's been a good experience for the mentee. So yeah, I would say the main difference, the main surface difference, obviously, is that yeah, you don't have that contest at the end of your mentor match. I think depending on which one's right for you, one might be better. If the idea of writing towards a deadline and being like, I might not be ready for this contest, if that makes you nervous or you think that's going to affect your quality of work, or maybe you just don't want to even have that contest on your horizon, you just want to focus on working with someone, you just want to focus on getting better, then maybe writer mentor match is sorry, I keep on saying writer mentor match, author mentor match. Maybe that's more of the experience for you. But then I know some people who really enjoy not just the contest aspect of pitch wars, but they enjoy like that shared sense of stress. Like really, I would say stress is something that binds you. Like when you all go through that same harrowing experience of agent showcase together, there's really like our pitch wars 15 group, we're still together to this day because we really like we're with each other at our most vulnerable. Like when you're getting no requests and someone else next to you is getting 30 requests, but then you also have people who are getting one request. It's like there's so much stress at the time, but so much empathy. And I would say that's what makes pitch wars maybe different in that yes, it's stressful, but that stress truly does bind you.
And you're not doing it alone. You're not going through
Yeah,
it
you're
alone.
not doing it alone. You're always like even when you have 0 requests, there are going to be 10 people around you who have that. That's the sort of like it's not great always, but it's sort of like the silver lining to the experience.
So, what would you say to someone who's on the fence? I realize that you decided at the last second to do it, but now that you've been on the mentoring side, what would you say to someone who's trying to decide whether this is the time to participate in pitch wars or if they need to wait, or if they're, in other words, what made you feel ready, or what do you think makes manuscripts authors ready to participate in an event like pitch wars?
I mean, the easy answer is if you have a completed manuscript, right, and you yeah, if you have a complete manuscript, and I mean, I want to say like, and you should feel confident in it, or it should be like revised to perfection. But honestly, if you have a complete manuscript, you really should just consider entering. And mentors maybe might kill me for this because this could mean you get like 300 submissions. Like my mentor and I, we've gotten like years where we've gotten like hundreds and hundreds of submissions. But I really think that everyone, as a writer, you should be able to give yourself that yes, give yourself that opportunity. I know so many people who almost didn't submit to pitch wars because they thought their manuscript was broken, that there's no way they could fix it, that they had revised it but still wasn't there. Or there's some people who honestly they didn't even get a chance to revise their manuscript and then they entered and they got in and it worked out fine for them. So again, like I feel like if you have a completed manuscript and again in good faith, like if you know there's something that you can do already revision wise and you know you can do it on your own, then obviously do that because you're going to have greater chances of getting in if you submit something that you feel like you've already fixed to your ultimate capacity. But if you have a manuscript that you've finished and you're really excited about it and maybe you don't know how to fix it or you have tried fixing it and again it's not working out, it's getting rejected, and the query trenches or CPs are having things to say about it, but you're not sure how to fix it, then I would say submit because nothing can hurt. Nothing bad can happen out of submitting. Like the worst that can happen is you get rejected, but you have to get used to that because you're going to get rejected in the query trenches when you go on sub to editors. That's always going to be a part of it. So once you take that out, then there's really nothing that you can lose and you can gain so much if you just give yourself that yes. Like don't reject yourself before other people can reject you. That's what I would say.
So you mentioned that there was no harm in submitting. Are there people who have submitted, like they've done pitch wars, they didn't get picked up by a mentor, they did some work, and then they came back the next year? Do you know if there are people that have come back multiple times with the same project as they revised over time to continue to work to find a mentor?
So I would say with the same project, not really. I do know people who were, for example, Pitchers 15, who then went on to submit again in either 16 or 17. But it was almost always, I believe, with a different project because the thing is, you do also want to give other writers a chance, right? And if it's the same project, like if you've already had that opportunity to work with a mentor on this really unique experience on this one project, and they've already given you everything they could have given for that project, then you I'm not sure if there's as much to gain. But again, I do realize that every situation varies. Like there's some people, a very small fraction of people who maybe have a bad mentor experience, and maybe the mentor didn't do as much work as they could have on the manuscript. And in that case, it becomes a case by case basis. Maybe the next year you do have grounds for submitting that manuscript again because you didn't get that experience that you wanted. But I would say for most cases, what happens is yes, mentor worked really hard on your manuscript, and if things don't pan out, then it's just like how when other things don't pan out, sometimes a book just isn't the one, no matter how hard you work on it or no matter how many eyes vet it. And so in that case, you do what you're supposed to do, which is write the next book. And in that case, I would say, yeah, there's if you want to submit again to pitch wars, you shouldn't be held back just because you've done it again, as long as it's with another book that's going to challenge you and that you could really benefit from getting more feedback on.
Do you think the same is true if it's a book that did not get a mentor? Like, in other words, you weren't accepted to the program the first year. Is it better to go back with a new project, or can you work on the project that you submitted the first time where you did not get a mentor and resubmit that project the next year after you've worked on it?
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on how much has changed, right? Because if you submit that manuscript one August and it gets rejected and then you don't really do anything, or maybe you like fix some lines and then you submit it again, then I would say maybe reconsider submitting that again. Because again, like if nothing has changed, just because you're submitting to different mentors, if it wasn't even like a close call, if it really seemed like there was the same feedback across the mentors, then you should really be working on that manuscript a lot before you submit it. If it happens to be like a really close call situation, and again, I feel like these are fewer um, in that I'm not sure if the swapping is still allowed. But at least back in the day, we really tried to make sure that the manuscripts that were objectively good, but maybe didn't fit our subjective tastes, still got into the contest. We really tried our best for that. But if it was a close call and you want to submit again, then I would say, yeah, if you've changed everything you thought that needed to be changed and you feel like the manuscript is almost there, then again, I can't say like don't submit, right? I would say give yourself that yes, give it a shot, and you never know what could happen. Maybe that manuscript does get in a different year.
And also, don't dig your heels in if it doesn't, and move on to the next
Yeah,
project, because you can
exactly.
always go back. You can always go back.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much, Joan. This was great information. I really appreciate it, and good luck to you with your book. Just to remind everyone, and I want to give you an opportunity to give us your website and everything, but to remind everyone, the Joan's book is Descendant of the Crane, and it's coming from Albert Whitman and Company on April 2nd of 2019. So, Joan, how would people find you on the internet? Where can they find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at Joan He Writes. I'm also on Instagram with that same handle at Joan He Writes. And you can also find me on my website, which is joanhewrites.com. I really feel like, yeah, I got lucky when picking my domain name so that it's all the same thing.
And that's fantastic. Makes it a lot easier. So that's joanhewrites.com,
Hmm.
and Joan He Writes on Twitter and also Instagram. So
Yeah.
good luck to you, and thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really fun revisiting all of these. Hopefully, it's helpful to people who are looking to submit to pitch wars in the coming year.